touching me. There is something here.
Did the nightmares begin before you knew about God and Lucifer?
Yes, they did. I was a toddler. As far back as I can remember, I was having these awful, god-awful nightmares. I mean, it was so bad. I would wake up screaming. My mother would be holding me. And it would start instantly. She would put me in her bed, and within 5 to 10 minutes of falling asleep, I would just wake up screaming, telling her what I saw, and she didn't know what to do. She would just, and this went on for years, and she would just hold me. And one day, because as children, we don't understand really where life comes from and how we are created, and all of the deep, dark things intertwined with that. We don't understand the fight between the holy war, God and the devil, Lucifer. And so it's interesting how these things can happen to us as children, and we start to figure things out. It wasn't till later in life, when I was, more of, kind of past my toddler years, that they all started teaching me about God. I had one side that was a Baptist and one side that was Jehovah's Witness, and my parents were very neutral. And we had a difficult life. We were extremely, extremely poor, many times without electricity, food, water. Walking to the store, we didn't have a lot of money. We only had one vehicle. It was not an easy life growing up. And eventually it had led to them becoming severe drug addicts. And that led to an even darker path in life for my half-brother and I. Story is for a different time. In these nightmares that I used to have, as far back as I can remember, as far back as I can recollect, and they've changed over the years, but they were horrible. They were horrific. They were demons, the scariest looking creatures I could describe. And a lot of them are in photos and lots of books that you'll read. I have the Book of Demons, and some of the things that I've seen in my dreams since I was a little tiny thing, same faces, but way more detailed. I mean, they are scaly. It's like looking in the face of a very evil lizard, dog-like creature. It is not something to be taken lightly. And the things that I would see, and over the years, they've progressed. I wake up screaming still sometimes, reaching for my husband, and he calms me, and they've changed to where I'm able to defeat these things now in my dreams. They are not winning anymore. And in the first half of my life, they would win. They were, everything at the end of the dream, almost every single time, would become this dark. It would become very dark, and it would would turn into a very slow motion scene. It's very difficult to describe. and it was horrible, and my voice would become very deep, and then they would take my voice away when I would call for God, scream for God, and then I would start saying these scriptures I didn't even know. And after a while you wake up like, what does this mean? What is happening?
What are some of the experiences that you've had in your life that has opened these doors? Have you always been interested in the paranormal and supernatural?
I'd say since I was a little girl, I've always been very drawn to the supernatural, paranormal movies and shows and things like that. But it was challenging because I had a hard time seeing evil and things like that. And, I wasn't big into the scary horror movies. They scared me. I remember my cousins would watch them, and I was the only one covering my eyes. A lot of the experiences that happened in my life is what led me to, I guess, an interest in the paranormal and supernatural, because I needed answers. That's all I wanted was answers, and I could not find them until I found the Warrens. And when you see things and hear things and experience things that are not of this world, it is very isolating and lonely and confusing, because nobody ever believed me. And even if they wanted to, they had a very difficult time grasping everything that you were saying. I had cops in my family that had horrific things happen to them, which led them to become Jehovah's Witnesses and things like that. They were so traumatized by their experiences, they could not speak of these things. And it's very serious. There's a time to be silly and laughable and playful, childlike, and then there's a time to be serious and stern. And I think I kind of mix a little bit of both sides of that in my intros as well. About 15 years ago, maybe a little longer, I really wanted to become a minister of some sorts. I wanted to work in a church. And I was in love with the entire idea. But a chain of events had led me down a different path, more towards a supernatural path, I would say. At which point, later in my life, there was so many supernatural things happening. Big, massive red orbs shooting up to the sky. What else? I remember being in my truck at times, and there would be like swirls, dust swirling around my truck, and these orbs that would swirl with it. I would see entities. When I was a child, I would go to bed. There were several times, and I kept trying to tell my parents there was something in my room. I even told my aunt on the phone, there is something watching me. There is something here. There is something here. And she said, no, you're ridiculous. There's nothing watching you. She didn't care. She would laugh about it. And it was so strong and intense. I knew there was something in my room, and I would go to bed at night so scared. And when I did, I remember there were several nights I woke up and I was completely flipped around, so my feet were where my head should have been. The blanket was perfectly laid over me. My head was hanging off the end of the bed. And what woke me up was this really long scratching down the wall, and it was awful. I was so scared. And it was, I remember closing, I knew something bad was there. And so I remember closing my eyes and praying, and I was so scared. And so I fell back to sleep, and when I woke back up, I was levitating off of the bed. I was freaking out. And there's other things, there was the demonic encounters, those encounters that I've had. What I could see, this went on for, I'd say, 4 years. Of dealing with this same demonic entity, at which point I had reached out to Tony Spera about the situation and having my ranch blessed, and I had just built a home on it, and just all of these horrible things were happening all the time. All of my tools, I work a lot with tools, and I had animals dying all of the time. I had a brand new septic system go in. It was constantly breaking, overflowing the house with nothing in it. We didn't even put toilet paper in the toilet. I was also boiling my water at the time. I was living pretty, in a pioneer way, I suppose. But all of my tools would break. Brand new tools, brand new paint guns, everything would break. Things would turn off, things would move around. I knew something very evil and sinister was trying to get into the house. And there were many nights where I would look out the window, and I would see multiple spirits standing outside. And I was able to get a lot of it on camera. You'll see in the photography films, to where I put all the pictures in there for you. But I knew there was like a high level demon. This wasn't a dark entity. I think it was a fallen, honestly. And I got the photo of it, and I share that in my films, and it looks just like the ones in the books. So I would either see big black wings constantly when I would look into the woods, or look at the trees, or just look outside, or look at a window during a thunderstorm or a sunny day. I could see these big, huge black wings, and I would stand there. Eventually I got brave. I would stand there and stare at it and pray. I'm like, you are not coming near my family. And there was even one night, I had grabbed the Bible, walked outside. It was the middle of the night, very late, like 2 or 3 in the morning, and I held this Bible, my Bible, and I would say things, and I was like, you are not welcome here, and praying and just screaming this at this thing. And it was so still. The air would get still. There wasn't a single animal. You couldn't even hear the owls. It was nothing. It was silent. And things calmed down for a while, and then they began to escalate again. And then I started picking up on cult, satanic activity in the area, which was one of my neighbors was involved in, and I started seeing things with them, and it was a difficult situation, all of this to be in, and so much of it happening over and over and over again. It's another thing that happened. There were nights to where there were mornings that I would wake up with 3 scratches all the way down my left buttocks, or my back, or the front of my stomach. There were many nights where I would wake up out of a dead sleep, but I would not open my eyes. I can't even describe this. I was so scared and petrified. There was something so evil standing in the room with me, looking right at me. And I knew it was there. The heaviness, the darkness, the thickness of the air, it's undescribable. It is something that cannot go unnoticed, even on a novice level of, even if you know nothing about the paranormal, you can differentiate this feeling from any other. And it was very serious. This happened several times, and it was always at 3 o'clock in the morning around that time. And I would lay there and I would not open my eyes. I did not want to see it. And I would pray for so long. It seemed like forever. It just went on and on and on. And then you would feel it go. You would feel like you could breathe again when it would leave, when something would make it leave. I've seen Ouija boards levitate. I've seen the pointers on Ouija boards levitate. I've seen black cloud entities above people using Ouija boards. I've seen, I mean, the list goes on. There's so many things. I've seen dog-like creatures, like wolves, but with much longer snouts, much bigger bodies, all black, and completely fade out. And there were other witnesses there when I had seen that creature as well. I've seen these things, these creatures on people's roofs. They have very long, very much like Slender Man, the legs and the arms, but a strange looking body, and their faces are so distorted. I can't even describe it. I mean, I would have to draw something for you to see what these things look like, and the way that, and they don't walk, they crawl and climb, and they're black, and I mean darker than night. They are black. They are blackness, pure blackness.
What made you start documenting your evidence?
So when I started documenting my evidence, it was really stressful because I've always been very quiet and, you know, done things on a more private. So when I started documenting my evidence, it was difficult and challenging for me because I've never been for the public eye. I've always been discreet and private about my work and the cases that I take on and things that I've endured, witnessed, etc. So it was difficult for me because there's so many people that are fighting and vicious towards one another in this field. I didn't want to be involved in any of it. So as far as YouTube goes, initially I was completely against it. I did not feel comfortable in putting any of my work on there at all. I feel like doing this for views and subscribers can become very competitive and lead to a very aggressive nature in a lot of people that are constantly battling one another, and I despise it. I absolutely despise it. I have found myself falling into a sense of regret many times in regards to having a YouTube channel. But I don't know of another way to place my work out there. And I don't really care what anyone thinks. I have been harassed and I have been aggressively approached and even from supporters of other people in the paranormal. And that's fine. They're doing what they think is right. That is the morals and values that they hold inside of their heart. I respect that, but I want no part of it. Personally, I'm doing the best that I can with minimal equipment. I have very few cameras, very few devices, things like that. And I feel like I don't need much, though, in order to accomplish what I'm trying to accomplish. You know, they're leading me, and that's all that matters. When it's a divine giving, I trust the divine source. And that's how I'd like to stay. And I had, you know, the only ones I ever really cared about were the Warrens, and I would watch little shows to, you know, like hauntings and ghost stories and ghost adventures, all that stuff, to see if anybody else was having the same experiences as I was and my clients. And I was just curious, really. So I started documenting, you know, the evidence itself. It's the easiest part. You just stay natural, stay pure, let it happen, let it lead you, see what happens. I started tinkering and playing with intros because I needed something to show and describe everything that I was feeling, a way to place you in my shoes other than just this a couple EVPs or a picture or things like that. So it was stressful learning how to create a film, and I taught myself. I had no help. It was not easy. It was stressful. I had so many corrupted documents. I lost evidence. I lost hard drives that were completely wiped out from these programs of creating intros. And then I needed something too that I could put everything into a video. I had no idea how to really do that properly. And so that's kind of how all of this really has taken place and blossomed.
What inspires your intros?
Every single intro that I have produced are mostly made up of the filming that has taken place that day or that week for that session. It basically just kind of shows a path, and a lot of it comes from what I see in my mind that I'm trying to create and put into a film so other people can see and feel what I do in such a sacred space. Everything from the music that I license and place into it is very special to me, and it all has meaning that is very underlying. If, for example, the cemetery in Massachusetts from the 1700s, I was in the cold, in the rain. It was not planned. It was after a family photo shoot that I was doing. And I didn't even change my dress. I didn't have time. I wanted to get on the road and through the stormy weather. And so I had this feeling to stop instantly when I saw it, and just instantly turn my truck. And with that one, it was really special because of the history behind it and the gravestones. They were chiseled, they were hand chiseled, and it was difficult to decipher a lot of the words, to see what they were saying, the messages, things like that were on the stones. And I thought it was just really important to make an intro of the walkthrough of the property and kind of put yourself in my shoes to where you can feel and understand on some kind of deeper level what is happening in that moment. I find that is extremely important to show in a very compassionate, empathetic kind of way for the viewers to understand the feelings and the emotion that are involved in all of this, and the time and the effort, everything that goes into a session before, during, and after. Usually before a session, I will see these visions, for lack of a better word, for an intro. And whether I have heard the EVPs or the angels or any kind of celestial communication, it all comes to me prior to understanding what is going to unfold. So at that point, I begin an intro and I place together a lot of the film, that has already been done, or what is happening in that moment. For example, the thunderstorm haunting. The power had gone out. I had candles. There was so much lightning. And I was just filming because you just never know what will happen. And I always feel very connected with any kind of rain falling from the sky. Or, even water right in front of us, or like the water sessions that I've done. I feel much more connected in a strange way, and I always have.
What are you feeling during your sessions, physically and emotionally?
It's quite profound. You're entering into a sacred space, especially when you walk into session and begin. And even, on really profound sessions that I've had, I wake up in this sacred space. I know they want to talk. I know I'm supposed to do something, find something, receive a message, and I know that it's going to lead to the next thing. So I'm constantly in this enthralling adventure, exploring this path that I have no idea where it's going to lead. So physically, before, during, and after sessions, you'll feel things. You'll feel sensations. You'll feel a heaviness when there's multiple entities around, especially the different levels of entities. For example, spirits, ghosts, angelic beings, other types of guides, celestial beings. There's different levels of them, and you can feel the difference when you are in their presence. And then there's the more simplistic physical feelings. If something walks by or goes by you in any way, you can feel the air shift or the temperature change, which is why I keep the AC off, all the windows shut, to see, so these things are noticeable. Another emotional state that we can fall into that I've noticed and experienced during session, prior to session, or reaching out to particular deceased ones or entities, is we pick up on their emotions, whether it's an angelic, graceful, playful, harmonious emotion, or another example, sadness or anger. I had one case last year, and one of the things, as I was feeling the pain in her brain when she was very ill in life. It was just awful. And then when I had closed the case, it stopped. Another thing that had happened in this case in regards to emotions was I could feel her extremely strong desire for porcelain dolls. And I actually wound up buying a bunch of them because I just could not shake it. It was just, she loved these dolls, loved them, just would look at them and just they're so beautiful. And I thought it was, it was fascinating to me because this happens with so many cases, and it's not always easy to understand what is mine and what is yours. And we can act on these feelings too. So you just kind of got to go with it. Another physical impact that I have experienced is extreme ringing in the ears, the feelings or touchings of hands touching you. It can even leave a blue print. Emotionally, it's a very sacred, harmonious type of feeling when there are ascended masters or angelic beings, divine beings, celestial beings in your presence. It can be quite overwhelming at times. It can become, it places you in a trance. It's difficult to describe. It's difficult to describe. So we just kind of, oh man, how do I describe this? Emotionally, there is a balance. You know, it can be exhausting, draining, and overwhelming at times, but it can also be very graceful, harmonious. It's very sacred. The feeling is very different emotionally than any other feeling really that I could describe. And a lot of times I will go into session feeling very anxious or nervous. I pray for hours and hours and hours, days, sometimes a week or longer. I've fasted before sessions before because, and the reason that I get nervous, and there's different reasons. You know, sometimes I just don't want God to be upset with me for asking the wrong thing, or the demons, the very dark, evil entities that do watch us in angelology, demonology, spirit communication, any type of supernatural paranormal work, they are always watching. So you have to keep that in mind as, okay, is something going to try to enter during this session? Because they do, they wait for those chances. And I verified this, the other side, in a lot of my films. During this communication, they speak of it when they see these demons or a devil or a fallen, and they're all very different things, but they're all intertwined into one darkness, which is evil. So being nervous or being anxious really kind of goes with the territory. Emotions can be affected and impacted greatly during these sessions, before and after as well. You know, you have all of these emotions leading up to a session, and then everything begins to escalate, evolve, blossom, subside during a session. So you're going through all of these things and trying to continue on with your task. And it can be challenging at times, especially if you're live and people are watching you. It can be very detrimental if you can't relax. And you'll hear them say to relax or calm down. It's okay. You're with me. You're with the angels. They're sitting with you. And you can feel at which point you become calmer and more focused. And at that point, you know, a lot of the time they'll say, okay, I see the light. It's getting brighter. She is getting brighter. And, you know, that kind of helps really kind of understand. They can feel and they know what we're going through, and they're trying to help the best that they can. while we are trying to work through all of this as well.
Were you taught how to produce these films?
And I was never taught how to produce films. It is self-taught. Anyone can teach themselves anything. And I think it's a very valuable skill to be able to teach yourself things, especially very challenging and difficult things that you know nothing about walking into.
Have you ever heard a demonic voice?
I have heard demonic voices. One time, there's been a lot of times, but one time that was really profound, and there were several witnesses there. I had been helping a friend who was using a Ouija board a lot, and myself and several others had gone over to his home one night, and we were just chatting. We weren't even talking about any of this stuff, and just in the middle of a conversation, and this very loud, aggressive, deep, guttural growl had happened. And I looked at them and I said, "You heard this, yes?" And they said, "Yes." And they were like, "Whoa, what was that?" And I proceeded to explain and things like that, and because you could feel the oppression, you could feel the darkness walking into this place. It was not good. But there has been several other times, I've heard them when I receive information. I've seen things about people that they tell me they've never told anyone, murders. I mean, they were just shocked, or names of deceased relatives. One time there was a woman, and she was on a dark path, and she had come out of a cult. She was extremely desperate to have abilities. She also didn't really believe in God. So it was a challenging situation for me to deal with, because she was also a neighbor, one of many with these kinds of issues, which is a reason I moved. So one night we are sitting outside and just chatting. I'm trying to get to know her. I'm trying to understand her ways. She's been practicing shamanism for years and all of that stuff. And I was never really into all of that. I did practice tarot and things like that because I needed answers, and I didn't know how to get them, and I didn't want to do anything evil, and I was afraid that was evil. So anyway, so we're sitting there, we're having a drink, we're outside, and I start getting extremely cold. I'm the only one. This is in Texas heat. It is a hot summer night. I'm so cold. I'm shivering. My lips are turning blue. And I keep hearing it in each ear. I keep hearing this name over and over and over and over. And I'm like, fine. So I look at her and I'm like, who is... And I say the name. And she says, "Oh my God." And I'm like, what? And she's so taken back by it that she repeats the name several times. And at this point, I'm like, yes, I'm kind of like, okay, let's move on. Who is this? She said she had spoken to a psychic, and that this psychic told her one day someone very special would come to her with this name, and it was her grandfather. And after she said this, I began seeing horrific things, and I'm talking images of someone pulling intestines out of someone's stomach, and it's really dark, and it was horrible. And as I'm seeing this, I tell her, I was like, I don't want to talk about this. I don't want to talk about this anymore. she says he was horrible, he was evil, he was such a bad man. And the night actually escalated, and I had felt a demonic entity step closer to us. And I knew exactly where it was and what it was trying to do. And, you know, my husband had to come out and carry me inside. We had to get her inside because she became very aggressive and violent and was manifesting a lot of really scary insecurities in a very, very dark way. It wasn't good. And, you know, she became suicidal. It just, that whole night, and amongst many others with her, were very, very dark and awful. And I did the best I could for a very long time to help her through all of these things and her family. Okay,